Howdy, howdy. Welcome, people. Welcome, welcome, welcome. See a lot of faces, cameras turning on. Welcome to one more session of Smartlead's Office Hours. My name is Akash, your customer success manager here at Smartlead. It's great to have all of you here, and I really, really appreciate you all for taking the time to join this Office Hours session. For those of y'all who are new, and for those of y'all who have already been there, we usually start the session with the audience. We'd like to understand you more so that we can also direct the webinar accordingly. So click on the chat icon at the center bottom of your screen and drop on the comments where you're from, and also let us know if you're an agency, a freelancer, or a SaaS company. Again, chat button at the center bottom and drop it on the comments. Brian, Marketing San Francisco. Welcome, Brian. Thank you for joining in. Nigel, UK, Bristol Digital Marketing Agency. Lovely. Gracia here. Barbara, welcome. SaaS company. Agency owner, Zach, welcome. SEO agency, SoCal. Digital Marketing Agency, Spain. Global audience as always. Germany, Marketing, Florida. Keep it coming, ladies and gentlemen. But the real reason why we're here and why this session actually matters, most teams are trying to replace tools, right? Based on who we see, based on calls we jump to, based on what we see in the market. Most of the teams are simply trying to replace tools. And the best teams are actually building systems. This session today will actually show you where Clay fits, where Claude Code fits, and how to contribute them into workflows that actually work. And to help us with that, we have Bill here. Bill is the CEO of SalesCaptain, a B2B outbound GTM agency serving brands like Nestle, Drip, Robin AI, and other YC startups, right? He's also the author of Cold Email Secrets, and he is the LinkedIn's top lead generation voice of 2024. And he was also named GTME of the year of 2025 by Clay as well. Bill, thank you so much for being here. Pleasure to have you. And I'll pass it on to you. A quick round of introduction, and the floor is yours.
Thank you for the invite, man, and really appreciate being here, having everyone. I know we have a really high amount of turnout. I think it's mostly because of the work you guys do and also how impactful probably what we're going to be discussing today is. As you mentioned, I've been in the B2B marketing space for the past 10 years. My background is in marketing, but we've been helping companies with go-to-market, which is one of the fastest growing sectors right now and full of opportunity, obviously with AI and tools like Claude Code, Smartlead as well as part of a mix, Clay. So we've been at the forefront for a while now. And yeah, what you mentioned as kind of like a topic for today is actually right. Like I think an issue that people have and slash a potential opportunity is how much Clay ends up costing, especially if someone's not using API keys. And that's why when platforms like Claude Code come around and people have access to APIs and Claude, there is that urge to kind of just replace Clay altogether, which I definitely share.
Right.
And we all kind of, have kind of pondered, maybe we don't need an interface like Clay anymore, which is not necessarily the case. And maybe it does work in some cases, maybe it doesn't in some other ones. So I think that's kind of like what brought me to today's topic, and which I find really interesting. It's like, is Claude and Claude Code replacing Clay, and then what is the actual best use case if we're going to market, right? Because that's what essentially we're here to chat about. And I think the question itself is not Claude versus or Claude Code versus Clay. It's actually how do we go to market in the most efficient way? Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters. And how do we do it in an uncomplicated way without becoming developers? My bachelor's in computer science, but I haven't written a line of code. And that's same for everything I'm going to be sharing with you today. There might be some really light coding in some of the use cases, but there's no actual code that anyone had to sit down and write. So again, the goal is the same. It's like, without becoming engineers, how can we leverage the latest and best of AI in 2026? And right now, this appears to be Claude Code. And, OpenAI as well, but Claude, because of a few of the features that they have, is a little bit more central to today's approach. So yeah, again, the question is, what has Claude potentially replaced? Where does it fit in the go-to-market tech stack? And do we really need Clay at the end of the day? So we're going to try to go through that, walk everyone through a use case that we have. I think a case study that really showcases where everything kind of fits together. And hopefully we can have some fun, have some really interesting questions, the opportunity to have a nice chat as well.
Absolutely.
So yeah, one of the big thing is A, the cost of Clay, which I haven't added in the slide so we don't get sued. And B, the amount of time that obviously everyone in the space spends building prospect lists. And I think that's something that's very obvious. I'm referencing as the hours on the slide, but even if someone's running an outbound agency, I'm sure a good proportion of their time is spent inside of tools like Clay or maybe Apollo or a LinkedIn Sales Navigator trying to craft the perfect list. And kind of the big promise is how can we expedite that and make it happen in kind of the most efficient way possible. The first kind of point here to make is, and I've already kind of lightly touched on it, that is that Claude Code is not necessarily for engineers. And again, everything that I'm going to be sharing with you has happened by regular human beings. Some of them do have an engineering background, but that's only an add-on. And another note to keep in mind there is Claude Code, especially because that's kind of the big promise here, goes hand in hand with Claude.ai, which is the web interface for troubleshooting. So for anyone who has maybe tried to use it alone, I would say this is not necessarily the right way to go. You always need to have the text interface, the chat interface next to you, helping you in the process. And then the next point is, what is a tech stack, right? So we've mentioned Clay, Claude Code, but there's a few more tools that come into the new way of doing things. I've added some logos at the bottom. Obviously, these are just as a use case, like as an example. There's many other tools that can be used instead, and I'm going to be walking us through it. But the main point is, even just Claude Code doesn't go along by itself. There's a kind of an environment around it. And again, do I need to be a developer? I've added some FAQs along the way. The answer is no. But there's one very important thing that, again, I'm referencing, and I wanna, before I talk about actual use cases, I want to talk about people who have maybe tried it and might, because it's been a few weeks, a few months since Claude Code has been available. So I'm sure quite a few people have already been out there and trying to make it work. I think I almost ruined my laptop setting it up. But all good. We're streaming, so I assume it's nothing wrong. But a lot of people might have had issues using Claude Code, or might have had issues having like a good outcome from it. And I think that's because we are going a little bit towards programming and engineering territory, and that doesn't require coding, but requires understanding what is the input. So if we're gonna use Claude Code and AI as a central part of our process, the number one step is, what are the inputs? What are we gonna input into the AI itself? What do we want the output to be like? So what are we trying to achieve? Because just saying, let's put Claude Code into our go-to-market process is not going to lead anywhere, and it's just going to lead into chaos and burnout. And then the third is, what does good look like? Like, what are the actual benchmarks? Let's say we want to use Claude Code to create personalized intro lines for each one of our campaigns. Cool. Do we actually know what a good intro line looks like? Because if we just dump data into AI and just expect it to have an output, and we have no idea about how to QA the actual outcome, we're still going to receive a crap outcome, which we don't really want to do. So we want to have a good definition of what good looks like. What do we want the end outcome to be like? Because that's how we can also do QA. And again, I'm referencing this first because I'm sure the question on everyone's heads might be, yeah, but I've tried it, but it's too technical, but I haven't made it work, but the output is not there. So I want to walk you through how to get it done right, and obviously how to integrate it within your approach.
Absolutely.
The second thing, and I've started touching on it, is which tool does which job, right? And again, there was quite a big kind of movement of and I remember we had Vern in London last, I think December, and kind of like the big Q&A was like, okay, we're building a Clay replacement, and we're not going to be using Clay, and whoever manages to build that all power to them. But when we're talking about like day-to-day work, it's important to keep in mind what each part of the tech stack can actually implement or replace. So again, the old tech stack maybe had Clay and an AI copywriting tool like Twain, just to empower a little bit the process, and then maybe a few extras, a few API keys. The new tech stack, and I'll walk you through what each of the tools and where kind of each of the tools falls, does have Claude Code as kind of like the brain that allows us to be a little bit more creative. Yes, we can dump more data into AI and we can get better outputs. Clay still in the process of sorting the data, but also including a few more tools like Prospero or like a few API keys that allow us to get cheaper data. And I think this slide will help a little bit more. So we still have Claude Code, which allows us to build custom things, and I'm going to talk about it in a sec. We still continue using Clay and API keys like the Blitz API or Prospero to have better quality data, and oftentimes have that data inside of Claude Code itself if we want to build an automated workflow. And then we still need the third part. We need kind of the runner. So Claude by itself, as we all know, same as Claude Code, can run if we provide it with an input, right? But assuming that the use case is I want to have Claude scrape a specific list every Friday because it gets updated. Let's say it's a company house list of new companies being published, being going online, and I want to have an ongoing kind of, let's say, task that does that in every Friday, every Monday, doesn't matter. So Claude by itself is not going to do that because it doesn't really have a brain in that sense. So that's where we use platforms like N8N or Make. So the setup and kind of the building blocks now become, we have Claude Code that's kind of like a semi-autonomous human that can execute some activities. We have the data enrichment layer, which might be just Clay, and we can continue using Claude Code and Clay as two different parts of the go-to-market stack. In some cases, we might have APIs directly inside of Claude Code doing the data enrichment and finalizing the workflow. And then we have an A10, which is there and it's used for anything that's ongoing, things that we want to have running in kind of like an ongoing basis. And I think this is a little bit kind of how to think about it. If I'm thinking in a flow chart, and I'll zoom in a little bit, we would have Claude Code to kind of scrape the source, whether the source is a list of companies or whether the source is a big dump of call recordings from sales calls that we want to analyze, doing some scoring and filtering within Claude Code as well, then passing the data onto Clay, where we include additional APIs like the Blitz API or Prospero or Company Enrich. And then for anything that's ongoing, we have the N8N layer. That's what it looks like, and potentially having that to push campaigns into Smartlead, Lemlist, whatever sequencer we're using.
Noted. And one question from the chat,
Go ahead.
Bill, from Gary, which is, how about Claude routines? Can it not run routine enrichment operations inside Claude Code?
Yeah. So obviously, and that's the beauty of it, there's a lot of things like that. And this is a good question, and I want to add an additional one before I answer that. What about just enriching the data directly inside of Claude? I might have included a note about it as well, like why do we technically need Clay? So yes, we can use Claude routines. The thing about using tools like N8N for the automation part and using Clay for the data part and not doing everything inside of Claude is one thing, transparency. So if something breaks, you want to have a really good log to go back at and make sure that, what was there an API key that faulted? Was it that the AI wasn't able to find data? So I'm not saying yes, you can use Claude routines, and I'm sure there'll be more things that Claude is going to be able to kind of, let's say, absorb from this stack as we go on. And again, that's something really cool. But if we want to have something that is able to also pull data and orchestrate different things as well, N8N works really well. If it's a minimal use case and we want something really specific, which we already know how to do, by all means use the routines inside of Claude. Similarly for Clay, if it's a really small or really simple enrichment task, it can definitely be done inside of Claude Code. So for really simple tasks is what I'm going to say, is what I want to say is like, yes, we can use Claude Code end to end. The infrastructure that I have here is what allows us to scale campaigns, to process 50,000 prospects or 100,000 prospects and be able to have a logic that kind of works with the rest of our tools, with the rest of our tech stack and everything that we're using to go to market. You can make it more minimal for sure, but I think like this is kind of the most minimum that it gets when you want to process large volumes. And that's today's
Yeah.
concept, right? It's not like how do we eliminate everything 100%. It's, how do we use the best of each of the platforms.
Makes sense. Thank you so much for that, Bill. I think one follow-up question as well from Thibault is any tips to automate the Claygent generation within Claude Code? Not iterating the prompts, but really create the clay table and the Claygents.
You mean using an MCP instead of Claude, or what is the question?
So the question is there a way to automate clay generation with Claude Code? Is a question that's come because you previously mentioned it's a minimal to enrichment at this point. So is this something that's doable, Bill?
Yeah, so if you go here, yes, technically you can skip the clay part and you can have the Blitz API. And that's why API keys and platforms, data platforms that give you access to their API keys are becoming a little bit more trendy. There's a few
Yeah.
more. I just mentioned these because these are the ones that we've tested at scale and that are consistently giving us good results. You can technically have these called within their APIs, within Claude, and you can do the entire enrichment within Claude, 100%, and I mentioned it before. So you can skip Clay entirely. The reason for having Clay in the process is because it's not going to cost you anything if you're using the API keys, assuming you have an older Clay account, because now with the actions, that's becoming a little bit more complicated. And also for the transparency, if something doesn't run, especially at scale, or if something fails, you're really fast able to go back and check what's going on. But yeah, you can do the entire
Right.
workflow within
Uh,
Cloud.
Makes sense. And I think Thibault has also answered, which is so the question is more towards is there a way to create a Claygent using Claude Code? Well, is that possible?
To create Claygent in the sense of doing the research, you mean?
Thibault, would you throw
Or
some light there? Mhm.
is it creating like a column itself, or is it creating, like, is it replicating Claygent within Clay, or is it creating a column within Clay? That would be done via the MCP, and then replicating Claude Code. I mean, I guess technically it can be done if you give Claude search skills and internet skills. Yeah.
Got it. It was create the Claygent on Clay with Claude Code. Makes sense, Bill. Thank you for that.
Yeah, 100%. And this is a fun start our team has created. I'm not going to go through it, which is kind of like a little bit where every part of the process falls in. For me, the funny thing, because I used to be a big Zapier guy back in the day, is how kind of older platforms are becoming a little bit more irrelevant, and we're seeing now Claude Code being able to take on more and more of kind of those activities. Um, and then something interesting in terms of which platforms each person should be using, because as I mentioned again, there's obviously the case that we can run everything inside of Claude Code, and there's also the case that someone might say, I don't want to mess at all with Claude Code, I don't want to spend time setting it up, I don't want to spend
Mhm.
time doing it in production. So I think it also has to do a little bit with people's roles, and where they are in the process of kind of learning how to use Clay, how to use Claude Code, if they're going to build their own, let's say, Clay replacement, which I have notes about as well if someone wants to ask in the end. So it totally has to do with people's familiarity and how much they kind of want to get their hands dirty at the end of the day. But yeah, something that's interesting as well when we're comparing the two platforms, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit as well, is what Clay does best, which is having access to all the data sources without having to do any setup, without having to purchase API keys, being able to instantly test different types of campaigns really, really fast, including intent signals, including data from multiple different email validation or email finding tools. And yes, obviously that doesn't work at scale, because at scale you want to buy access to the API keys so you can save on costs. But if your goal is to experiment and have small batches of campaigns that you can run really fast, Clay still is the most efficient way to do that, and orchestrating more complex, let's say, data workflows as well. Where Clay becomes a little bit, I'd say, obsolete or not necessarily useful is when you want to do custom scraping, when you want to have more custom scoring logic and scoring filters, when you want to have runs, when you want to have AI genuinely do something that's a bit more of a complicated data handling or data processing workflow, where Clay itself is simply enrich yes or no. and then actual kind of API orchestration using multiple tools, grabbing data from one platform, passing it on to a different one as well.
Right.
And then the trade-offs, and I'm not going to focus on the first one or the second one. I'm going to focus on the last one, which I mentioned before as well, which is visibility when things fail. Like having an interface, having a text interface works well for engineers, works well for people that really know what they're doing, but makes debugging a lot harder, especially if something fails at scale. Like if you have a column and a table, if you have a table with columns and rows that you can actually look at and identify where the issue is, it becomes a little bit easier to diagnose and troubleshoot. And that's kind of like the bigger takeaway there. I'm not going to make it anything more than that. It's just easier, especially if you're setting up something for the first time, because it gives you the opportunity to troubleshoot it fast, and then maybe you can have Claude Code take over and do that in a more automated kind of way without having Clay in between.
Makes sense. And one more question regarding this. At a high level, how does the cost of using Clay compare with using providers with API directly? Well, if we were to express it as a ratio roughly, how much more expensive is Clay going to be versus direct?
How much more expensive Clay is going to be? It depends on which data platforms and data sources you're using within Clay. Because
Mhm.
every data source costs a different amount of credits, and they obviously publish that, so that's kind of public info. The difference with using API keys is at scale, it's maybe 10 to 20 to 50 times less expensive using the API keys themselves. Like some of them give you kind of quote unquote unlimited data.
Right.
So using the API keys, the trade-off is API keys at a good enough capacity might cost $500 to $1,000 a month. So this is definitely a use case either for brands in house that have really specific workflows that have a lot of volume. Let's say they receive 10,000 signups a day and they want to make sure that they de-anonymize them, enrich them with company information, etc., etc. That's a really specific use case, and you can find
Mhm.
which API gives you the best data for that use case, and then build the workflow. You can build it with Clay, you can build it with Claude Code, but for brands that are testing or just starting out, or even for agencies that want to see what kind of data sources make the most sense, then obviously you're using Clay. And then when you figure out when Clay starts costing you, let's say, more than $500 to $1,000 a month, it's definitely the time to start thinking about buying access to API keys, because each of them might cost, between $200 and $1,000 a month. So it makes sense when your costs, I guess, start stacking up, not necessarily in like, okay, if I use this data source, how much am I paying versus that one? I would say it's like, once you're paying for more than $500 to $1,000 a month on Clay, start looking into APIs. That's how we did it, at
Makes
least.
sense. Thank you so much, Will. Thank you for that.
Of course. We have a few more questions on the chat. I'm gonna let you pick any if you want. Otherwise, we can also go on.
So I think everything on the chat is answered until now.
Perfect.
You go ahead. But
Awesome. Section number 3, I've called it in production. So these are things teams are running today, including a use case that we built a couple of weeks ago that kind of really showcases where Cloud signs. So personalized lines for your emails at scale. You can feed Claude Code call recordings from your entire sales team, closed won calls ideally, so that it can really learn your ICP using Claude Code as a brain. And then you can feed it a list of prospects along with the details per prospect. If you want to have it do additional research on the prospect, and then have it write personalized lines at scale, building prospect lists, custom prospect lists, and I'm going to expand on this, that you can't really access on the public web or through traditional scraping. Doing ICP filtering almost for free with Sonnet, with Sonnet sub-agents specifically. Building, again, prospect lists that your competitors can't find anywhere else. Using custom data sources like G2 and Capterra by scraping, their entire database pretty much, but don't tell them. And then autonomous optimization using Claude at the back end of your campaigns to analyze, having the ICP and analyzing the results of the campaign, the different campaigns you're running, including data like the ICP, the targeting itself, job titles and company descriptions, the actual companies you're targeting, and then their results. How many positive replies versus negatives versus objections, you're receiving from each of the ICPs, and then allowing you to optimize almost autonomously based off of that, or at least providing you insights. Like these are some of the really hot use cases, kind of pre-made, that Claude Code really shines. Versus, let's say, Clay, if you're going to do it at scale. And these are things that you can't really do in that regard within Clay itself. And I'm not going to talk about what's feasible with Clay, but we can definitely talk about it if you guys want. So the next one is a case study, and this is the list that couldn't be bought. The use case is a real one. We're working with a B2B cybersecurity firm. They offer cybersecurity services to companies in the UK, and one of their targets was, well, any company that kind of has interest or has started looking into cybersecurity more seriously. And they helped us identify a list of Cyber Essentials certified companies online. But the only caveat, and that was a government database, I think, or let's say public database, so we don't get sued. The only caveat is that list was protected, and it's here on the right. It was protected with Cloudflare bot protection. And you also had to type into the search box in order to get any results. So this is what the list, kind of the platform, or let's say the database, looked like. You had to type something, you got results. So there were two issues. Thanks to Cloudflare, all of the traditional kind of scraping mechanism didn't work. And you also had to type in things to the search box to get any results. And this is something that the team kind of took on. And this is the workflow that we built. I'm going to walk you through it step by step, and then we can go back. The first step is we used Claude Code to write a playwright scraper. And this is literally the description that we gave Claude. And it created kind of the input for Claude Code to build the scraper for us and execute the scraper on the Playwright platform without any manual coding by a human at all. So all we did, if you read the description here, is we created a really detailed brief. And that's why I said in the beginning, it's got to do with understanding what is the input, what are you trying to achieve, and what is the good outcome. Just URLs, because that's what we were getting. As you can see here, company names, sorry, not URLs. We were getting a list of company names. We then had to match the list of company names to the actual companies and the domains of the company so we can enrich them and then reach out. We used Serper. So the issue is we had the list of company names. We wanted to match them to the exact domains. You can technically do a Google search for every company name, but there's always the chance that the first result of a Google search might be company news. So it might be Bloomberg, sharing insights about the company or about a cybersecurity breach, let's say, which we don't want to do. We don't want Bloomberg as a prospect. We want the actual companies that we had scraped. So what we did is we inputted the list that we got from Claude, the list of company names inside of Clay, and then we used a column, an API column technically, where we called Serper, and we had fetch the first 10 results for each of the company names. So it did a live Google search, gave us the first 10 results. So for every company name, we had the first 10 URLs that would come up as the results from Google. And then we used OpenAI again within Clay to match the actual domain of the company with the company names, used Company Enrich to find additional details, filtered them out using Clayagent, and that ended up validated the data. That was the last step. And this is what we added. And we ended up with a list, and you can see it here on the right, of company names and domains that no competitor could buy. That was a good kind of campaign by itself because it allowed us to reach out to people using a signal, which is that they've received that certificate that no one else in the market has. So this is not a list you could buy from anywhere. You could scrape from anywhere. You could have gotten from LinkedIn anywhere. And this is also how we use Claude Code hand in hand with Clay to make it happen.
Interesting. This is sauce.
Yeah, and this is what I'm saying. Like this use case, when we put it together, became a really good tell for me and the team as well, with regards to where Claude Code kind of fits in the stack. in terms of allowing you to do things that are genuinely innovative for the client, that you can do in very little time, that you don't need, because a lot of people obsess about building replacements, building platforms and all that. And my take on this, and I'll share it now and we can then move on, is yes, technically you can build a Clay replacement, you can build a Smartlead replacement, but assuming you have the technical expertise to even build that, maybe as an agency, which is we always have the urge to replace tools, the issue becomes that, let's say Clay has spent all this time and have the engineering capacity in-house to integrate and update 150, almost 200 APIs in a weekly basis when they get updates, when Cloud releases new APIs, when Smartlead updates their platform and there's new features that are integrated with the Clay platform. So technically anyone can build a Clay replacement, anyone can build a Lemlist or Smartlead replacement, but the cost is you have to have someone maintaining those platforms and those kind of whatever infrastructure you end up building. Whereas if you focus your usage of Claude Code on more realistic and hands-on activities, like building a brain, as I shared before, for your outbound campaigns, providing you insights on the campaign performance, or building scrapers that you can run one-off, allowing you to scrape lists that don't exist, or do kind of go-to-market sauce like this. This is something that you can solidly continue building without technical debt or having to maintain things on the back end.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, then a few tips. I'm going to go through them relatively fast. They might be obvious to some people, they might not be. And I think I shared it before. Claude AI is your friend, so plan things before you go to Claude Code. You don't want to be executing activities or tasks you don't know about or haven't been planned clearly within Claude AI, because it costs a lot more if you're describing the workflow within Claude Code and you miss a lot of things that Claude AI allows you to do. So plan in Claude AI, and this is also what we did with the scraper that we built, generate the prompt and then paste and run it in Claude Code. And then obviously the loop goes back that you might end up receiving several error messages or questions you have no idea how to answer. You put those questions back into Claude AI, either through a screenshot or copy and paste, and that's kind of how you debug. The second one is an interesting use case we kind of uncovered within the Claude platform. If you're using Sonnet subagents, you can actually validate the ICP on the $200 a month plan almost for free, and that allows you to do a lot of work that would have otherwise costed you Claygent or OpenAI credits. Literally, you can do it for free on that plan. Classifying company types, writing personalized intro lines is if that's something that you want to do. The other thing is how to improve copywriting using Claude Code, because a lot of times the issue with copywriting is we only look at the outcome and we don't have the opportunity to provide feedback and direction to the AI. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit as it's doing the copywriting itself. So the whole point is, before you end up giving the brief to AI and then you get the output, which is the copy, spend a bit of time and add a few kind of gaps in between where AI asks you for input before it actually produces the final result. That way you're able to approve the first line, approve the offer, approve the CTA, and you do it step by step, so you're not just exposed to the end outcome without the opportunity to kind of have input in the process. Again, for people already on Clay, you don't have to rebuild everything from scratch. You don't have to kind of build an entire thing altogether. You can feed your winning emails into Claude Code, extract patterns from what has worked, set up your API keys directly within Claude in the Claude MD setup files, and then run your first campaign a lot faster than you would have if you were doing everything from scratch. Again, debugging in Claude as well. I've added it twice, not just the brief itself, planning in Claude Code, but also planning in Claude AI, but also debugging in Claude AI. Making, again, a few more, let's say, technical notes. The Claude MD file, which acts as kind of like the memory for Claude Code, has a 250-line hard limit. Keep it in mind because you don't want it to start hallucinate. This is where you can put your ICP copy, your copy, any rules like that, any copywriting guidelines, so that Claude can remember it, Claude Code can remember it, so you don't have to reference it every time. Again, writing decisions and facts you wanted to remember into MD files and skills, because the MD files and skills files won't work. So write decisions down and then have Claude reference them back whenever you're starting something new. Previewing, obviously, anything before you send it. So build a dry run flag for anything new that's calling external APIs. Unlike Clay, you can't really hit pause. So you want to preview what you want to kind of create before you hit play. Be aware of the context window as well. So, the hidden cost of having a long session is not necessarily the credits, is the quality degrades the more input you give into the AI. So keep in mind it's on the bottom right, bottom right of your window, typically the context window itself. And when it hits almost 50% of context, make sure you reset it and start a new section, a new chat. Using MCPs for sure, but be mindful that they cost a lot of context window when you use them. When you load an MCP, let's say you want Claude to build a campaign for you or to build a Clayagent within the Claude Code interface, be mindful that the rest of your operation, the rest of your script has to be really minimal, and you want to avoid the back and forth with Claude Code. You want to do it inside of Claude AI, because that means that your context window is running really fast, and then you're going to end up having crap spit out in your face after a while. What not to automate, like a few notes on that. You can really easily, and this is again from work we've been doing so far and kind of patterns we've noticed, might change in a couple of weeks or in a couple of months, depending on how Claude kind of progresses. Lead scoring and enrichments, ICP scoring, anything that has to do kind of like with data handling, you can really easily automate it using Claude. Having a hybrid approach where the AI drafts and then a human approves for anything that has to do with copy or debriefs from sales calls or calls in general, or ICP definition, or building their lead scoring criteria, because you can never be too sure that it's actually correct. And then for the time being, at least, keeping fully manual replies to warm prospects, anything that has to do with your pricing and sharing pricing conversations and notes, relationship building, things that seem obvious, but we might try to automate in the heat of things. What kind of prospect data to send through Claude? I'm not going to go through it in detail, but you can see it afterwards. By all means, don't store your API keys. Be really mindful of that. Don't send your logins into the Claude Code chat. It's obvious, but probably worth mentioning as well. And then I've added a few things which we've included in the guide as well for how to get started. The 5 prompts to copy and paste. I'm not going to walk everyone through it, so that they can get started with Claude Code really, really fast. That's it.
Awesome. And one main question, will you
Go for
be
it.
also sharing the slide with us on the chat?
100%.
There we
I
go.
haven't created a link yet. I was literally updating a few things about an hour before, because this is how fast AI is changing. But I'll be sharing a link afterwards, yes, where people can access the file
Yeah.
itself. And there's
Awesome.
also some guides that we've built specifically on Claude Code. I didn't want to make this too technical, because I know it can get, the engineer in me can come out. We've put together 2 PDFs. One is how to use Clay and Claude Code, and the other one is kind of Vibe GTM, so Claude Code GTM, which people can access as well. And I'll be sharing those links as well. They're also within the presentation itself. So that, they're really good hand-in-hand guides. I use them, when setting it up for a few of our team members to kind of help them.
Awesome. I mean, thank you for sharing that with us, Bill. I think it'll be helpful for all of us, for that matter.
Let me
Perfect.
find the links and drop
Thank
them
you
now.
for spilling the sauce, Camilo. Yes, we'll have everything sent across, and the floor is open for questions, folks. In case if you have any questions, please click on the React icon at the center bottom of your screen. Click on Raise Hand. I'll spotlight you. You can ask your questions directly to Bill. We have a hard stop in 15 minutes, so I would kindly request you all to stick with one question so that we can, cater for everybody. So again, React button, raise your hand. We'll spotlight you. You can shoot your questions. Anybody? There we go. The links are on the chat. One question: how do you
And
score ICPs? Yeah, there's one question. Sorry, Bill, you had something.
oh, no. I was gonna say I owe everyone the link to the presentation itself. I'll do it in a minute. How do you score ICPs? I mean, same as with everything. Okay, lead scoring is not new, right? If you go back to ActiveCampaign, which is a platform that has existed for the last like 5 or 10 years, it allows you to have workflows that do a kind of like ICP scoring. For me, when it comes to scoring in general, I have two things. The first thing is company and ICP scoring. So the way to do that, you obviously have to look at what your most valuable clients are. So that's where I would start from. So let's say we have two main segments: enterprises where they have one use case and a marketing team, and then we have small businesses where it's a different use case and they don't have a marketing team. So let's say these are our two ICPs. So the way you would score them, the first score would be the ICP score. So it would be how closely they match each of those ICPs. And then you want to have specific criteria, specific points, which show you how close you are to each of the ICPs. So let's say, you have company A and company B. You want to score them based on their company size, based on their industry, based on employee size of specific departments, maybe based on the tools they're using. The score itself, the biggest item in it should be that if you look at this company, if you manually research this company, you would consider them a good fit prospect. So literally, you would just want to translate whatever criteria you use, whatever main sales questions, let's say, you use to qualify a prospect during a sales call, and translate them into scoring criteria. And then the way you go about scoring is you use AI. You fetch as columns, either inside of Claude or inside of Clay, the data points you want. For example, size of engineering team, if they have certain security certificates, if they're using a specific CRM, if they're using any of your competitors, whatever makes sense, whatever you would typically ask. And then you want to score those items using AI. The second score you want to have is a signals score. So obviously the first thing which is really important and which you want to keep in your CRM is for every company you have, based on its ICP, how close it is to the ICP. So that's one. The second thing is a signal score, because I assume for the people on the call, they have things like RB2B tracking website visitors. They have their CRM where prospects might be changing companies, or they might have a new CMO joining the company. So all these things that are happening in a company's ecosystem, you want to score them as to how important they are in terms of making a prospect warm. Let's say someone signs up on your product, 10 people from the same company sign up, you definitely want to have a bell for that. That is like, okay, this company is a good ICP fit and they've just become warm. So ICP scoring, you do it with AI, typically within Clay or within Claude Code. You pass on the company information, you score it, and then you push it back to the CRM.
Makes sense. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that, Bill. And one follow-up question to that is, there we go. Since you're using Claude Code, are you tracking usage and token cost yet, or mainly judging it by productivity?
I mean, we're judging the total. We don't track credit. We don't track token costs. We're tracking how much we spend, because we might use either more advanced, and that's the other thing with AI, right? Like you have to become technical to an extent. For me, that means in the go-to-market space, identifying which agent and which model of the platform to use. So for simpler tasks, if it's just simple classification of data, we'll use maybe, let's say, Sonnet, or we'll use dumber platforms. If I'm doing something more high level, if I'm crafting the email template, I'll try and use Fable or whatever is the latest model. So we don't really track each of the credits or each of the tokens that we spend. We track how much we spend overall, and we have a certain budget per project that we want to be spending every month. So we look at the accumulated cost.
Makes sense. Camilo has his hands raised. Let me quickly spotlight him. Camilo, if you can unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
I got a few here. Um, so yeah, I already so Apollo. Is Apollo still a thing? Because I remember it always being like Eric from Growth Engine. I worked with him for this one company last year, and we started with Apollo. So why Prospero over
I
Apollo?
mean, Yeah, no, 100%. The data platforms change all the time. They change in how frequently they bring in fresh data and also refresh their existing data. There's no kind of hard recommendation, and as I said in the beginning, these are just some of the recommendations that we use. It mainly depends on the industries you're going after, and then the types of data you typically prefer, and also the cost as a consequence. So new APIs and new platforms get kind of built all the time. I don't have like a hard or solid reason. We've generally found better data at scale using the Blitz API and using Prospero. But we've been using Apollo, since I think 2018 or 2019. It's not the main platform that we use anymore, but it's really handy if you want to just do a bulk data export on a specific industry. Maybe let's say it's local businesses or something that's you don't care that much about precision and you still want to have a data set. At the end of the day, it's whatever you have a subscription with, because the Prospero API key, I think it's also like about $1,000 a month. So at the end of the day, you decide a few platforms to go with, but we're always testing. So those recommendations might not be the same in 3 months, or
Well,
also
can I
depending
piggyback?
on the region that you're targeting.
Can I piggyback off that question? So really quick, where have you seen success more in pulling data for small businesses and what platform?
So none of the platforms. Whenever it comes to small businesses, and again, Apollo is a good one for that. But what we typically do, because we're nerds, is we'll do a live scrape of the market whenever we have the need for that. So we'll either use Serper or Apify and do a custom scrape of the industries, because the thing is, you can use pre-classified data because that's what Apollo offers. Technically, they scrape all the data, they classify it using AI, they add additional enrichments, and then they provide it to you. Because that's our bread and butter, we typically build clean new data sets whenever we start working on the project. It's not the most efficient, or it's maybe the cheaper, not even the cheaper way to go about it, but it gives you access to the majority of your time. And that's what we care about whenever we're running these activities. So we'll do a live scrape. Google Maps is probably the main data source, but for example, we have a case working with Nestle Professional when they're targeting hotels. We scraped Google Maps, Agora, TripAdvisor, Booking.com, pulled all the data together, deduplicated it, then enriched it with additional information. And then one hack that we found that works really well is we use Zenrose, the API within Clay, to scrape the website, find additional email addresses, potentially phone numbers, and also, if we can, identify the business owner or the general manager, because oftentimes they live within the website or they're listed somewhere on the website. And then we try to find personal info for them, because the biggest issue with local businesses and outreach to local businesses is most of the times they don't exist on LinkedIn. Like if you want to target, local massage or tattoo shops, most likely they're not on LinkedIn. So the biggest issue is how do you maximize the data, the contact data, without necessarily always using to info at or hello at email addresses. So that's why like our hack was going through the website and trying to extract as much info as we can from the website itself.
Awesome, man. Thank
But
you.
again, you can use Apollo. It has a company list. It has the default contact details. You can't go wrong if you want to test the market for the first time. Like that's still an option.
Awesome, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilo. Next up is Sunay. Sunay, if you can turn on your video or unmute yourself, we can shoot your question. Can you unmute yourself? Are you able to now?
Everything will be shared, the slides, and I'll share the links to the playbooks that we've built separately as well. I've shared them on the chat already, but I'll share them as well. And then the Smartlead team will share them as well.
So now you might see an option saying asking you to unmute. I've just requested you to unmute. Can you do that? I think there seems to be a problem. Whenever I click, it says host isn't allowing. Devesh, Can we please look into that? In the meantime, SERP of a small business scraper, is it correct? Is it a right assumption, Bill?
Yeah, took care of it.
There you go.
Yes, Serper API works really well as well because they have API is like a treasure trove for scraping. It has pre-built scrapers for almost everything that exists out there. So you can use it to scrape TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, every major platform. Don't use it for LinkedIn. You don't want to get banned, but it has a lot of different scrapers already built in for many niche websites as well that most scrapers don't cover. So like the basic scrapers would cover Google, Google Maps, TripAdvisor, LinkedIn, the main platforms. Apify has an entire marketplace where anyone can build a scraper and use a scraper that someone else has built. So it's quite nice.
Awesome. So now I think there seems to be a technical issue with it. I think the team is also not able to unmute you. If you can drop it in the chat, we'll pick it up for you. In the meantime, I'll pick up other questions as well. How do you find intent of potential leads prospects with Claude Code? Is LinkedIn comments enough, or what do you usually do to find intent? Well,
Yeah. Let me start with a pet peeve of mine. How many people post on LinkedIn? It's less than 5%. How many people comment on LinkedIn? It's probably a slightly higher percentage, but doing outreach and relying only on commenting is not a solid idea because one month you might have 50 prospects, the other 100, and the next 5, depending on what you're scraping. So keep that in mind. Trigify works really well. I think Clay does it as well, but Trigify also works really well for scraping LinkedIn comments. There's a few more tools that are popping up, so always keep an eye out whenever it comes to LinkedIn because they change the platform all the time. It's important to look at what works, what kind of like is the latest technology because it's easy to get banned, especially if you're using your own LinkedIn account. Be really careful; you don't want to miss your account. And then how do we find intent? The example I shared is a brilliant one because for me there is the intent that you can buy pre-made from platforms like Clay, from platforms like Trigify, from any data provider that says we offer intent data, and then the intent data is the same for everyone. So it's companies hiring, someone new being added in the leadership position. It's new technologies detected. They end up being the same preset data that if you have access to, your competitors have access to as well. So I'm not saying don't use them, but what I'm saying is the best intent is people from your ICP that have spent time to join niche communities, to go to conferences, to attain a certification. So try and find where those communities, where these people exist. So for me, for example, if you ask me what is good intent for SalesCaptain or for someone, if I want to find people who are interested in go-to-market, the best intent, for example, is the Slack channels that Clay has, that Smartlead has, because I know that the people there, if they belong to my ICP, because not always everyone will belong to my ICP, they care about go-to-market so much that in contrast to everyone else in their business, they've gone ahead and joined the niche Slack channel, or they follow a Twitter account, or they follow a specific LinkedIn company page. So when talking about intent, I always try to identify smart ideas, conferences, LinkedIn events, whatever it might be, based on the industry that I want to target, and then use those to build rapport with the prospects. Because you don't always necessarily want to have like a one-on-one. Like my grandma died and I posted about it on LinkedIn, or I commented, on a colleague who got a promotion. There is no intent in that, unless you want to combine sales with, the passing of my loved one, which is not really a good idea, right? So the point is, for intent overall, try to find niche ways to go about it that your competitors don't have access to. And then another maybe slightly counterintuitive thing, just because you know something about someone, you don't necessarily have to reference it. The biggest and boldest example I give is if just because you know what someone's underwear color is, you don't really have to tell them in their face. So you might know that someone commented on, let's say, Bill's post or whatever it might be, and Bill is an influencer in X, Y, and Z space. You don't want to mention, hey, I saw you commented on Bill's post, because I might have commented, Bill, you're an idiot. If you want, you can slightly reference it. Like you can have a line like, PS, I've also seen Bill talks about go-to-market, for example. But many times you're also better not using it at all and just talk about go-to-market. So if that's your topic and you've scraped the list of followers from someone in the go-to-market space or any space, you're better off using that versus referencing, oh, I saw you commented X, Y, and Z, and that means you really want to buy my product. Crap. Like, we don't respond to outreach like that. And then the last thing with copywriting in general, because everyone is on a race to use AI right now, and that's a good thing. AI messaging goes in and creeps in a lot more in our conversation. So anything that you can do to make your messaging sound humane, including rewriting it in a more human way after AI has written the first draft, will do wonders for your conversion rates and to actually get people to respond to you.
Awesome. Perfect. I think last two quick questions for the day, Bill. I think one is from Sunay, who had his video on. The question is, I was mainly wondering if you are targeting non-traditional targets. For example, I'm targeting research labs in academia. Specialized copywriting is very important, as we really have to assure our outreach doesn't seem like a sales pitch. I was wondering what recommendations you may have for myself with your stack. Thank you.
So what is the recommendation towards, just to make it more specific? Is it about niche copywriting or?
Yeah, it is about that. It's for copywriting, because copywriting seems to be very important for them.
It is 100%. One of the most important things is using AI for the things that it's best at. AI is good for two things right now in the go-to-market space. A, research. B, data classification. So doing company research, because you can have AI go really niche, go to different communities, including Reddit, including whatever is available online, and fetch those live conversations and tell you what the actual problems your ICP is facing. You definitely want to use that when you're creating your copy and when you're building your campaign. So the first step in everything that we do is to verify the ICP and the ICP details and the main problem the ICP is facing, and answering the questions, why me and why now, using AI. Right. Because unless you're able to, you have to do it anyways. You might do it manually, and kudos to whoever is doing it manually in 2026, but you should be using AI to do that. And then data classification, I think we've covered it enough. But it's something that's like given that we should be doing research with AI. I call it language market fit, actually, because you want to identify the exact keywords that your market is using to describe its pain point. Because even though it sounds like, if I talk to any of my friends, some of them might be in consumer marketing, direct to consumer marketing, and I reference GTM, they're like, what is this, right? So, but for us on the call, GTM is really basic, so it's really obvious, it's out there. Or if I say Claude Code X GTM on a subject line, everyone here will open that email because you have the context. But if I send it to someone that's still doing marketing, but maybe they're doing performance marketing, they might say like, this is not relevant. So identifying the keywords that the market speaks and the language and the actual problems separates a campaign that gets positive replies versus a campaign that gets objections. People saying, I don't have time, people saying, reach out later, people saying, this is not relevant. You can't always know, and that's the thing with anything go-to-market, you can't always know if you know the language of your market until you run the campaign. But the moment you start receiving the first replies, you need to evaluate them and check what percentage of the replies is positive versus objections, negatives, unsubscribes, etc. We have a whole playbook that on how to kind of identify and debunk what's going on. Because you can't really know what you don't know until you test it.
100%. Thank you for that.
I'll share the link to the presentation on the chat, by the way, for anyone who's still with us, and then we'll share it with everyone as well via email.
Perfect. And the last question for the day from Andy, which is, Bill, what books and resources would you recommend for a new GTM engineer? Our volume will push to 1 million in a month, 1 million a month by the end of the year. Thank you.
So what books and resources? YouTube is really good for this. I would tell people to start with something really basic. Clay has really good documentation on it, and you do want to learn like a basic platform like Clay, because the same logic of company enrichment, people enrichment, find people, do research, write copy, applies to everything outbound, everything go to market, and then you can substitute certain parts using Claude Code, using N8N, etc. So learn one basic platform, and Clay seems to be this platform right now. I'm sure there's resources from platforms like Smartlead as well on the latest and greatest. So I would say, A, Clay and relevant tools. B, follow the founders of companies like Smartlead, like Hayreads, like Clay, etc., because they publish a lot of content and a lot of their latest case studies. YouTube is your friend as well, and then communities, because the real learnings happen when you come across a problem and you ask a question. If you try to learn without a specific goal, without trying to solve a specific problem, it's harder to digest information. It's better if you try and do something and fail, and then you ask questions on the communities and you learn through feedback, and people give you the shortcuts and you identify why they work and you implement them, versus just trying to do everything from scratch from the get-go. And you have no context how to use, I mentioned, for example, the character limit on the CloudMD files and a lot of other things which I skipped through, because I'm like, okay, if someone hasn't come across these things, they're good to keep them on a manual or a PDF till someone comes across this problem. They're not relevant to someone who hasn't started yet being, part of the problem and solving for it. And also,
Makes
you can
sense.
find me on LinkedIn if you have more questions. Yep. Obviously, I'll drop it on the chat as well. We also published a lot of content, like our team literally does that, because it's a new space and it's an amazing opportunity, because a lot of growth can happen if people use these tools and these practices this year, next year, hopefully for the few years to come.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Bill. And I also know you have a call to jump to, but thank you so much for extending this for us. We've come to the end of the session. Any parting notes before we take a leave, Bill, from your end?
No, I'd say, I've really enjoyed the questions. It makes me really happy to be sharing things that we all care about, and you see how kind of passionate this makes me. And it's good to see people engaging, so I'm super, super happy and excited about it. And I genuinely hope this session has helped people on the chat and who have been here with us. And B, there's an amazing, incredible opportunity for the B2B space specifically. In the past, it used to be that e-commerce and direct-to-consumer and drop shipping was the big hype. I think in the B2B space and go-to-market, there's a lot of money to be made by helping companies go to market in modern ways, using AI, etc. There's obviously a lot of hype with AI, but there's also concrete use cases in the B2B space for how to actually deliver value to the market. So that's what I'm genuinely excited about, and hope people can have kind of the same perspective and definitely benefit from it in their day-to-day and in their lives as well.
Awesome. Bill,
That's it.
Once again, thank you so much. First of many, would love to see you again. And folks, thank you for taking the time. As we know, 3 consistent things in life: death, taxes, and office hours every Thursday. I'll see you all on the next one. Ciao, ciao.